I have a little statement here, and then Senator Luetkemeyer does too, and then we'll take questions. As we've begun our session this year, we're united, ready to get to work on behalf of everyone in Missouri. Our focus this year is on results, making sure that our government is accountable, disciplined, and delivering real value for the people who fund it. One of the ways we're doing that is through a new method of budgeting called priority-based budgeting in the Senate Appropriations Committee. And the intent is to make sure that we have measurable results for the amount of money that we're investing. So what are we getting for what we're paying into the system, and could we be doing it more effectively? Agencies will be expected to clearly define their goals and measure performance and demonstrate results so that we can make informed, responsible decisions. We will not be making cuts just for the sake of making cuts. It is about stewardship. Families live within their means, and they expect us to do the same. So that will be a priority on all of our parts. And as you've been talking about budgeting, you realize that especially during the COVID era, lots of federal funding came into Missouri. Mostly it's been accounted for and spent or going to be spent. So we need to take a close look at what we're spending, and we want to be sure that we are providing value for the money that we are taking from the people who live here.
Thank you, Senator O'Laughlin. As the session begins, Senate Republicans remain guided by a simple principle that government should work for the people who pay for it. That means lowering the cost of living, growing our economy, and exercising responsible stewardship of Missouri taxpayer dollars. One issue that's consistently been raised by communities across Missouri, and the top issue this session for Senate Republicans, is the need for real estate tax relief. Homeowners are facing rising assessments and increasing property taxes, and for many Missourians, particularly seniors and working families, that burden is becoming unsustainable. No one should be taxed out of their home by government. This concern has united our caucus and has also drawn bipartisan support based on some of the bills that have been pre-filed. This session, our goal is to advance responsible, workable solutions that provide meaningful property tax relief to homeowners while balancing the needs to maintain local government services. Another key priority this session is going to be working alongside Governor Kehoe to develop a responsible and sustainable path to eliminate the state income tax. We believe the best way to create jobs and to grow Missouri's economy is to let Missouri citizens decide how to spend their hard-earned money rather than government. Done thoughtfully and with fiscal discipline, eliminating the income tax will make Missouri more competitive, attract investment, and strengthen families and small businesses. As we move forward with this session, our focus is going to remain on affordability for Missouri families, opportunities, and responsible government. Senate Republicans stand ready and united to work with the governor and with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to deliver common sense solutions for Missourians. And with that, we would be happy to take any questions.
So I noticed you mentioned property taxes before the income tax. I just want to make clear the property tax relief is a bigger priority than the income tax phase out in the Senate?
Well, here's what I would say. We had our caucus retreat in November, and one of the things that we have traditionally done is we will poll members and say, what are your top 3 priorities? It's fair to say that the property tax and some type of real estate property tax relief was the #1 polling issue among Republicans. We had Republicans, of course, that said we want to work with the governor on the income tax, but the #1 polling issue among our members was property tax relief in the form of real property taxes.
So in the first special session last year, the one with the stadium subsidy bill, there was a property tax relief measure in that being challenged in court, but you're talking about it again. Is that to say that what was in that bill is not going to work, needs to be repealed, and something different needs to be put in place?
No, I don't think it's necessarily that it needs to be repealed. Obviously, there's some uncertainty as to the validity of that law, given the fact that there's a case pending in the Supreme Court right now. And so I think what our members want to make sure of is that we're providing tax relief to middle-income families, working families, to the extent that that legislation is jeopardized by the lawsuit that's pending in the Supreme Court.
Well, how would you ensure that school districts and fire districts aren't defunded if you cut off property tax?
So I don't think the proposal that you're going to probably see gain steam this year is going to be to eliminate the real estate property taxes. It's not going to be to cap real estate property taxes, which is something that, by the way, we have done with bipartisan support when it comes to seniors and those on fixed incomes. But for working families, I think what we would like to see is more predictability in the amount that property taxes can increase. So there have been proposals over the years, for example, that property taxes cannot increase more than 5% or the rate of inflation, whatever is higher. I can speak from personal experience in my district. I mean, this is the most salient issue for my voters, regardless of whether they're a Democrat or Republican. People feel the strain of property taxes. And we need to do something about it. People should not be getting taxed out of their home by local government because their property taxes go up by 30 or 40% in a particular assessment cycle. And so that's what I think is the more responsible way of doing it. If local government understands that they're going to get a set increase, again, we're not talking about cuts, we're talking about increases, but it's predictable. That's probably better for local government budgeting and then also for the homeowners who are not at risk of getting taxed out of their home.
There is concern on an income tax elimination that would be the response that would be raising sales tax, which would be an affordability issue. Like, is that something that you're not wanting to touch at, or is that something that you're kind of working on as it goes by as far as elimination of that?
First of all, and in saying this, I'm going to withhold a little bit because I don't want to step on the governor's toes. Obviously, he's going to be releasing his proposal on Tuesday. I've had conversations with the governor, as has Senator O'Laughlin, so we're aware generally of what the governor is going to be talking about. But let me just say this big picture. There are thousands of tax loopholes right now that don't involve raising sales taxes on groceries, for example, that need to be closed, that generates a significant amount of revenue that could help offset some of the cost of an income tax elimination. I know from talking with the governor, and we'll hear more about this in his speech, that he has a plan that is gradual, responsible, and make sure that we're keeping net general revenue basically where it is right now. It's just shifting the tax burden away from the income tax towards consumption-based taxes.
Senator O'Laughlin, I think it was on Facebook you expressed support
More than
for
likely, yes.
Senator Fitzwater's pharmacy benefit manager bill. I noticed that some of those bills were some of the first referred to committee today as well. And if you can just tell me why you support that.
Pharmacy benefit management, I think in the beginning, was put together as a way to try to control the cost of prescription drugs and to help keep the cost of health insurance down. And, maybe that worked in the beginning, but what we now have is pharmacy benefit managers who now own the insurance companies, and we have sort of a monopoly. And what's happening is the big pharmacy benefit management companies are sort of cutting out the family pharmacies, and they are dictating, which drugs they can sell, and then, other ones have to come to the benefit manager. And so ultimately what's happening is a lot of our family pharmacies are closing. And especially for the rural area, but even for other areas, they're a part of our community. And like the one that I go to is in a very small town. The pharmacist went to school with my husband, so, about the same age, knows everyone, knows their entire history. They're really an important part of our medical network. And how do they stay in business when they can't afford to? So there's a lot of practices by the PBMs that I think need to be looked closely at, and some of them need to be stopped. So,
can you give us an example? What is a big pharmacy benefit manager you're talking about? Name a company or two that you're talking about.
Express Scripts is a big one. That's the one that the state works with. And so if you have thousands of customers, and here's an example. I get an inhaler. So I go into the family pharmacy and they have it and give it to me, and they say, we have to sell this to you for less than we have to pay for it. Well, how you can't do that kind of thing. So from then on, I always got it from Express Scripts, but I think that kind of thing is wrong. And I think they all do it. I'm not just pointing the finger at them. Some of those things have just gotten out of hand.
Senator O'Laughlin, the Missouri State Capitol Commission is still working on getting together a master plan. If a plan does get presented, will it get support in the Senate?
Well, my position on the Capitol Commission plan is that it isn't complete. And so I understand people have been working on this, I think, for years, actually. And even though they've been working on it for years, membership on that commission has changed. There's no scope of work. There's not enough detail to protect the taxpayer, in my opinion. And if you take on a great big construction project that's going to go on over multiple years, the odds of that thing getting way out there in terms of cost are pretty darn good. So I support keeping the Capitol up. I mean, you have to do that. It's an historic building. There's a difference between needs and wants, and I don't want us to commit to something that we haven't even detailed yet, and we're not sure what we're getting, and we're just handing money over and saying, okay, well, just give us whatever you think is best. You know, we wouldn't do that on our own home. So
on the scope of work in the OA analysis that you had requested, it lists in there specific scopes of work that the Capitol Commission had requested from the firms that made the concept plan.
Yeah, so for instance, the electrical systems need to be updated. Well, what does that mean? Those are the things that are missing. Those are the things that we need more detail on. And we need to have an owner's representative. They would be representing the state, and their position is to monitor what's being spent and be sure that we're not being sure we're staying with the plan.
I was going to ask, last year MU Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield had contract negotiations, and you had a Senate hearing about that. Now it's going on with SSM, and I believe it's United Healthcare. Have you been monitoring that, and are there any plans to have a hearing if they can't come to an agreement? I think it's funded through the end of this month currently.
I did not know that. So, yes. It isn't right to have the two entities not be able to come to an agreement, and then people can't see their doctor. And the MU Anthem thing, I said, well, we'll just have a hearing about it then if we can't get together. Well, of course, nobody wanted to have a hearing. And I said, okay, well, we won't have a hearing if you make an agreement by June 30th. And they didn't. But, you have people who are seeing cancer doctors, and you have high-risk pregnancy, and, that we need to not allow that to happen. And I know some states have passed additional legislation, which, gosh, we hate to do that, but mandating that those people can continue to see their doctor until an agreement is reached. I don't know the details of, what's been done in other states, but I do know they have sort of addressed that. And I think it needs to be addressed. So I'm going to look into that.
Question for Senator Luetkemeyer. So the Chiefs announcing they're moving to Kansas.
Yep.
A big sort of loss for Missouri, right? You're from that area. Is there anything for the legislature to do in response to that?
Obviously, it was very disappointing as a person who represents the city of Kansas City and portions of the city, and also as a Chiefs fan at a personal level. Yeah, that was a tough one to hear about. Caught a lot of us by surprise too. Frankly, when we had conceived of the Kansas Star Bond plan, I think the running assumption among everyone here in this building was that they were going to draw some commercial district that roughly tethered itself around the stadium and the immediate, economic zone around the stadium, as opposed to drawing it around 85% of the state's population, which is the only way they were able to make the revenue work. In terms of responses, I would point out two things. The first is, I don't think that this is still a done deal. There's a lot of things that have to be signed off on by local government, because a lot of the tax revenue that would be diverted to repay bondholders requires buy-in from mayors and city councils in Kansas. From what I've I've read from members of the media, it sounds like that a lot of those mayors were maybe not consulted by the legislature in Kansas before that proposal was released, and that might be because they were under NDAs. But I think there's still an opportunity for that deal to potentially fall apart. And I'll just say that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it doesn't sound like it's a totally done deal.
A separate issue related to crime.
Mhm.
We're starting to see maybe a push for a way to crack down on juvenile offenders who are repeat offenders.
Yeah.
Do you see something like that coming out in the Senate? Do you see a need for something like that?
I do. This is something, juvenile justice reform is something that we've addressed almost every year that I've been in the Senate. Yes, I think that there are some, particularly, you have like cross-jurisdictional problems where you maybe have a juvenile who commits a crime in a particular county, but they live and then end up being picked up in another county. And right now, the law basically says that the county where they live is what controls as opposed to where the crime was located. I mean, that's, when you look at the adult justice system, the person who prosecutes is the prosecuting authority where the crime was committed, where the victims are located. To me, that actually makes a lot more sense. And I know that's one of the reforms that's being looked at. I think there's a general sense. I'll just speak for Kansas City. I think that, people who commit crimes are dealt with a very different way if the crime is committed in Platte or Clay County portions of Kansas City than versus Jackson County. And that's just a reality. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But yeah, I would say if somebody commits a crime that's a juvenile in Platte County, the Platte County prosecutor should be handling that case.
Senator, in regards to the income tax, in your discussions with Governor Kehoe, has there been any consideration for the fate of what happened in Kansas during the 2010s, where they passed massive tax cuts and ended up having to raise taxes because they also ran into some significant revenue issues?
So,
Have those been in discussion?
So what I would say, again, without getting into too much detail, because I don't want to step on the governor's toes next week, is that the plan that the governor intends to release during the State of the State is a responsible, incremental, phased-in approach where we would maintain, budget neutrality as the tax proposal would go forward. And beyond that, I'm going to let the governor speak to it next week.